Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's John. I don't know if it seems like this to everyone else, but every single quarter of the year seems to be flying by faster and faster. And I look down at the calendar one day and all of a sudden it's July 1st, the first day of the second half of the year and the first day of the third quarter of the year. And I am the co-host of an event that we are currently in the fourth iteration of. We started back in 2023. It's called Historathon, where we read nonfiction history all year long. And the year is broken up into 4 quarters. I won't go into each quarter, but for at least for the month of July and August and September, we read nonfiction history written in and about the years 500 AD to 1820 AD. So I have 10 books, some of the nerdiest, most recondite books that you can find on YouTube, and I will share them with you. So if you don't have any ideas about what to read as far as history of the next few months, and you want some, you can use this video to just dip your feet in and get them wet a bit. I will also link down below, since we're kind of, we've been doing this for a while, I'll link down below the videos for quarter 3 pile of possibilities. That's what I call these. That's what all of us, the host and the co-host, call these videos of recommendations for 2023, 2024, and 2025. So if this isn't enough of a list of possibilities, you have probably 30, 40, 45 more possibilities that are time era appropriate if you want to go check these out. So, number 1. This is a book I showed, I think in one of my last 2 or 3 university press book hauls. And by the way, my last one that I think I posted in April, maybe May, apparently kind of was popular and got a little bit of attention. So I'm glad people enjoyed it. I will be posting another one in the next couple of weeks. I'm just going to do 10 at a time now. So sort of like I'm doing 10 in this video. I think 20, 25 books kind of gets a little clunky for one video. So, but anyway, back to this list. This is The World as We Know It, From Natural Philosophy to Modern Science by Peter Deere. And if I remember, I'll also link below, there will be a lot of links below, a review that I wrote a couple of years ago of another book that Peter Deere wrote on the history of science. And he is an historian of science, sort of a sociologist of science too, that argues that our understanding of the scientific method and the way that we scientifically investigate the universe is historically contingent and conditioned by a number of things. And he looks at not just scientific innovation, which he does, but how people like Newton and Carl Linnaeus and Antoine Lavoisier helped create frameworks for understanding nature, while also emphasizing the idea that scientific ideas are shaped by cultural assumptions and institutions and religion and politics, as much as by pure empirical evidence. So I really, really enjoyed that other book that he wrote. It looks to be a bit more theoretical and philosophical, the other one, and this is more straight science with a little bit of that philosophy background. But this is one idea if you're interested in the history of early modern science. This is one I've made a promise to a few friends of mine in the Discord group to read. And we had, I think, meant to read this last year, but I may have bailed. Maybe me, maybe someone else. I don't know. It's in the past, right? This is Citizens by A Chronicle of the French Revolution by Simon Chameau, who's the embarrassment of riches down there. I also could have pulled from my bookshelf because I have it too. This is kind of a little bit of a revisionist history of the French Revolution, from what I understand, because it argues that the violence of the revolution wasn't a deviation from its ideals, but an inevitable consequence of them. That rather than being the triumph of liberty and equality, he argues that the collapse of the monarchy and the revolutionary rhetoric and the glorification of political violence fostered a kind of atmosphere in which coercion and terror became acceptable tools of the government. Rather a long book, so I'm sure it's much more complicated than that, but we will be reading this, I think, for quarter three. And of course, for quarter three, since it is, 1500 to 1820, who would I to not include something about the Tudors? I'm sure we'll be occupying a lot of your time. This is my only Tudor book, I think, but I don't think I've shown it in a Historathon pile of possibilities before. So I'll show it here, and I have it on good. I've heard good things from several different sources. So this is Lucy Wooding's book. Oh, I didn't mention that the World as We Know It is from Princeton University Press. This is Lucy Wooding's History of Tudor England. It is, so we're going from 1485, when Richard III dies at the Battle of Bosworth Field and Henry VII becomes king, and going all the way through the death of Queen Elizabeth I, I guess, and maybe a little bit before and after to sandwich both ends. But roughly about, 117, 18 years of history there. Mostly, from what I can tell, a social and cultural history, not so much a history of monarchs and dynastic relations, but religion, culture, society, stuff like that. Also a rather big book. This is from Yale University Press. But if you like that dynastic history and biographies, I bought this from the University of Chicago a few years ago, and they have a really long sale. I wish other university presses would have 6-month long sales, but the University of Chicago Press comes out with a book list of a long catalog of books that they have on sale. The deals used to be really fantastic, and now they're good. They're acceptable. But you used to be able to buy books for $5 or $6, and now they're about twice that on average. But this is a book that they published called King of the World by Philip Mansell. And this is, I don't know if you can tell by the gold gilt there, this is the life of Louis XIV. Not really a lot to say about it, other than I think it's just a biography of Louis XIV with a kind of global edge, not just a French or Western European or European twist, but maybe sort of panning out and looking at the global influence of his reign. I don't know, but also quite a substantial book. I would like to eventually get around to, of course, reading all of these, but I say that about all of them, don't I? And I have, I think, voiced some opinions about the New York Review of Books line on this channel before, mostly about the fiction. Their fiction is very hit or miss for me personally. Their curatorial sensibilities are not always mine. But their fiction tends to almost always be really good. Sorry about the creaky chair, it needs some WD-40. But I've had this for a while. I used to have an old mass market paperback, and I found that they decided to print this, and it's still available on their website. So if you're interested in it, you can go buy this. This is The Crisis of the European Mind by Paul Hazard, who was, I believe, a French historian working in the first half of the 20th century. And this is kind of a look at obviously a pretty brief period. I don't know if you can see the years there, 1680 to 1715, which is, by the way, the same year that Louis XIV died. And it is kind of an argument that in this brief period, inherited beliefs and views that were grounded in religious authority and tradition and classical learning slowly gave way to what we would call kind of the birth of the scientific method and scientific inquiry and skepticism and individual judgment, as opposed to tradition and authority. Kind of a simplistic way of collapsing it down into a sentence or two, but it's been a book that I've wanted to get to for a while. Some really, really interesting history books at NYRB. I know everyone usually goes there for the fiction, but check out the history section sometime. Speaking of which, I actually also have another NYRB recommendation. Same thing, go there, check out the history. This might be the kind of classic history of the war. This is the 30 Years' War by C.V. Wedgwood. And it's everything from what precipitated the whole war, which was the defenestration of Prague, to the end of the war, which was the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which, at least according to classic historiography on the subject, has a lot to do with the way the modern nation state looks in Europe. And not so much about military campaigns, not a military history, not more about religious divisions, dynastic rivalries, stuff like that. I'm not a big military history person at all, even though I'm going to try to dip my foot in maybe a little bit for quarter 4, World War I and World War II. We'll see how up I am for it. But if you're feeling really good about yourself, she wrote this. C.V. Wedgwood, by the way, if you're not familiar with her, is in fact a her, or was. She wrote this in 1948, published it in 1948 when she was 28 years old. What were you doing when you were 28 years old? Were you writing books about... Anyway. Some encouragement to be productive and get off your phone, I guess. And this is a book that I found at, well, judging from the blue little dot, I'm guessing a library sale. But we don't really have any events where this fits in neatly. So I thought I'd sort of fudge it in here, because some people might be interested in knowing that this exists if you don't already know about it. This is kind of a classic book. It came out going on nearly 50 years ago. And it's written by Stephen Greenblatt, whose name you are likely familiar with. This isn't a work of history in the usual sense. It leans much more into literary analysis, as you can probably tell by the subtitle there. This is Renaissance self-fashioning, from Moore to Shakespeare, and that's Thomas More in the subtitle. So before the Renaissance, you get this kind of assumption about personal identity, that it's fixed or inherited or immutable, something like that, at least for a particular person. And then in the Renaissance, you start to see people, especially authors, come along and portray people, literary characters, who have identities that are fluid and obviously constructed and affected, product of things like authority and religious conflict and cultural expectations and all of that complicated stuff. And Greenblatt, in arguing his case, looks not at historical events like you might think of with a traditional book of history, but he looks at the writing of people like Thomas More and Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare. And if you've ever taken a class in early modern English lit, especially one with a theory component, a literary theory component, you have probably at least heard about, if not read, this book. And this is actually certainly not a new version of the book, but it is from the University of Chicago. So, Renaissance Self-Fashioning by Peter Greenblatt. Excuse me, Stephen Greenblatt. Three more. This is from a press I've talked about a few times on the channel, but not a book I think I've ever shown or talked about. This is by the great English historian Hugh Trevor Roper. This is The Crisis of the 16th Century. Religion, the Reformation, and Social Change. This is actually not so much a unified thesis of a book. I think it is just essays. It's 9 essays specifically, rather long, averaging, something like 40, 50 pages apiece. But it interprets the events of the 17th century, like the English War and the Fronde in France, as symptomatic of a wider structural breakdown across European societies, including long-term economic strain and conflicts between expanding state powers, which led to the breakouts of rebellion and civil war and other kinds of institutional instability. It's from the Liberty Fund, which is, unfortunately, it looks to me, no longer to be publishing anything new. I think the last catalog they have on their site is from 2023, which is really unfortunate because they have some fascinating intellectual history, economic. If you're interested in economic history, it is the place to go. They are still selling their books. They are just no longer coming out with new ones. And they have also phased out many of their hardbacks, even though their paperbacks seem to be still fully in stock. So if you're interested in the history of ideas, intellectual history, economic history, European history, go take an afternoon and thumb through that latest catalog. It's on their site. Just Google Liberty Fund book catalog. It's the first thing that comes up. And very reasonably priced books. And you can find coupons on their website. No, not sponsored. More than willing to take one, though. Hi, Liberty Fund. How you doing? So Debs, actually, Debs Rayner, who is also a co-host of this event, also, she beat me to the punch. Leave it to Debs. This book also made her list. This is Captives by Linda Colley. Kind of a classic in the field. Sorry about the glare. Let me read the subtitle to you. The Story of Britain's Pursuit of Empire and How its Soldiers and Civilians Were Held Captive by the Dream of Global Supremacy, 1600 to 1850. So, from what I can tell online and on the inside covers of the book, this looks at the global and imperial history of early modern captivity narratives in Britain, looking at the capture and enslavement of Europeans by non-European powers, especially merchants captured by North African corsairs, as a central feature of early modern European history. And then she argues that those captivity narratives had a lot to do with shaping British national identity, religious self-understanding, and ideas about race and empire and civilization. So, kind of one of those books you always see in the bibliographic essays and note sections of other books, but I've never read. So, Linda Colley's Captives. And one more biography, a literary biography. I found these at my big library book sale, which happens, at least where I live, every October. Ooh, back in 2022 or 2023, I found both of them sitting next to one another. Got really lucky. This is Frederick Pottle's biography of Boswell, of James Boswell, the famous biographer himself of Samuel Johnson. And this is Boswell, the early years, 1740 to 1769, by Frederick A. Pottle. This takes Boswell from his birth in 1740 in being birthed into a kind of a family of legal family, of Scottish sort of aristocratic, sort of highborn family, all the way up through his first major meeting with Samuel Johnson, which happened sometime in, I think, the mid-1760s. Emphasizing Boswell's kind of emotional volatility, his ambition, his literary ambition, his fascination with literary celebrity. If you're interested in this, by the way, I also have it sitting, like I said, I found both of them together. I didn't want to pull it because I'd already, of course, pulled 10 books off my shelf, so I didn't want to pull another one. There is a volume 2. It's not by Frederick Pottle. It is by someone he sort of handed off the project to, because Pottle himself was put in charge of organizing and collating and editing all of Boswell's papers, which were and may still be at Yale University. So he did that while one of his colleagues, whose name was Frank Brady, wrote Volume 2, which takes Boswell's life from 1769 all the way up until when he dies in 1795. So I have it on good authority that this is spectacularly good, and that Volume 2 is solid, but not nearly as good as Volume 1. So, yeah, that's 10 books. 10 books. Let me see if, or let me know if you saw anything interesting. And if you plan on participating in Historathon, let me know what you are going to read. Leave me a comment below, please. Make a video of your own if you have a channel. And if you don't know about Historathon, hopefully you know now, and you're interested in, like I said, dipping your toes in the water. History is a fascinating thing. And I hope someone will read, you guys will read at least 1 or 2 books. History from, like I said, 1500 to 1820. Let me know what you're doing for the next 3 months. I will be back soon with another video. Bye.